In the last video, we learned how to do a test policy from within the Business Rule Composer. And now we're going to look at how you can trace an orchestration to see how the policy executed historically. So there's a little setup required to do this. First, we're going to go to BizTalk Admin Console and then go to your application. And let's just refresh to make sure everything's current here. And if you go down and look under policies, you won't see anything there at first. So what you need to do is add the policy that we're dealing with to this application. So we say here, click on the application, right click add, and then click policies. And you'll get a list of, I think it's all the deployed policies. You're going to click the one you want. And now if you go to policies node here and click refresh, you now see the policies there and that it's deployed. And by the way, you can also undeploy and deploy a policy from here. So now click the policy and right click it and then go to properties. And here you'll see a tracking tab, and tracking by default is not on. So now if we turn on all four of these just so we get the most possible, then click OK. Now what we need to do is go run our file again. So I'll pick the sample loan2 file this time. I'll paste it in the input directory. And then I'll just give it a few seconds to run. We go to our output directory, and I think it's finished already because it's 12:01 is the time. Okay, so now we go to hat and click run here. So we get the most recent executions. Now let me show you the difference. If I go right here on an orchestration I ran 10 minutes ago and I click message flow, notice there's really no trace here, and what we're missing is a thing to click on right here, which you'll soon see when we go to the new orchestration. So now if I go to the orchestration that I just ran like 1 minute ago, I'll go to message flow. And we should have a little link here, and it's not there. So I'm going to go do some debugging here. Okay, I'm back. I decided that what needed to be done was you have to restart the BizTalk host. So I came here, I did a right-click restart, I dropped the same file, I went back to hat, and I ran the query again. So now we're at 12:04. And now if I do right-click message flow on the orchestration, make sure you're on the orchestration when you do this, then you will now see this little blue link right here, and it says follow this link to view the policy execution details for this orchestration instance. So it's a clickable link. If you click on there, you'll now get a list of all the policies. So actually one orchestration could have called 2 or 3 policies, or it could call the same policy 2 or 3 times. So you're going to get a list of all the policies that were called by that orchestration. Then you pick the one you want to see, you click on it, and now you get this little option. So you can now see all the facts that were applied, the rules that were fired, the rules that were not fired, the conditions that got evaluated, and then the agenda update. So let's look at the fact activity. So you can see here asserted these 4 facts and retracted 4 facts. Now, how do you go back a screen? There's no back button here, right? So if you come back up here, you say File, Navigate Back. It's kind of a little bit awkward. And then you say Rules that Fired. So again, I think there were 8 rules. Some of them were negative and some of them were positive. And so the negative rule fired for the commitment, but it looks like the positive rule fired for the other 3. And then we go, actually you can click one of those then. It's clickable. And you can, all it shows here though is basically your if-then statement. So it's kind of like letting you see the way the rule was set up at that time. Because if you go to the Business Rule Composer over here, this is the way the rule is today. But if you were looking, for instance, at a week ago, maybe this rule had been deployed a new version, and now we're at version 1.1, and you don't have the source for 1.0 anymore. Well, this would show you what the source was at that time. So then you could do navigate back. That was the rules that had fired. Navigate back again. And now let's look at the rules that did not fire. And so we have the 3 negations and the 1 positive. And let's navigate back again. and now look at the conditions that got evaluated. So here, this will tell you again the left side and the right side, and whether they were equal or not, and what happened, whether they were true or false, basically. And then we navigate back again. And the last thing we have is agenda updates. And I think again, if you click on this, it's just going to give you the rule. So that's what this little debugger is good for. And this again is good for going back into history and looking at the history of your policy execution. Of course, there's a little more overhead to keep all this data. It's stored in your basically your DTA HAT database, and you have to turn it on again by going to Microsoft BizTalk Admin Console, adding your policy to your application, and then in that policy you can turn on what kind of tracking you want. And now, remember a minute ago we saw these 4 different items you could track here. See, now you can see how that ties to what you see here. So depending, for some reason, if you only wanted the conditions, you could uncheck these and only do conditions. But for safer debugging, I would turn on all these, at least on your development system. And then whether you turn them on or not in your production system, that is maybe debatable depending on what your requirements of your environment are. So this video has covered how to do tracking of your policies historically over time using HAT.